Um, Alongside myself, you'll be hearing from Emily Phillips, Jing Wang, and Maria Gianzi, who are on the point source group. Next slide. And to start off, I'll give a quick overview of the topics we'll be covering today. First, I'll give some background information regarding the regulations that require facilities to submit emissions data, as well as specifics regarding what facilities are applicable. Next, I'll touch on the newly proposed rule revisions EPA has made to the air emissions reporting requirements, or AERR. After that, we'll begin by going over the combined air emissions reporting system, as well as the updates to the HAPS guidance. We'll then do a walkthrough for the 2023 emissions inventory submittal. And to wrap things up, we'll go over the quality assurance checks, as well as some helpful tips, resources, and next steps for facilities. So beginning with the regulations and applicability, there are a couple of federal and state rules that require Georgia EPD to collect emissions data to form an emissions inventory. First is the federal rule 40 CFR Part 51 Subpart A, which is the air emissions reporting requirement. There's also the EPA air planning agreement, as well as our own state rule, which you can find there. These rules are what mandate and authorize us as a division to collect emissions. Currently, the Georgia Environmental Connections Online, or GECO, is updated for the 2023 emissions inventory year. GECO is used by facilities to do things like generate permit fee invoices, submit emissions inventories, and emissions statements. Now, the combined air emissions reporting system, or CAERS, will open up for facilities on February 5th, 2024. CAERS is similar to GECO, however, developed by EPA. And for this upcoming year, Georgia EPD will require facilities to report data by June 30th. Typically, extensions are given or have been given in the past. However, do not expect any further extensions to be provided by Georgia EPD after July 15th next year, as this is a hard deadline. As far as applicability, all major sources are subject to the aforementioned rules and thus are required to submit emissions data to EPD. There are some exceptions to this rule, and those include permitted but not constructed facilities, facilities with federally enforceable permit limits, for example, a synthetic miner type permit, or a facility that is major for hazardous air pollutants are also not applicable, or they are an exception. And also facilities which were shut down during the entire calendar year would not have to report emissions. Please note that 2023 is a special year. It is what is considered a triennial year, and triennial year thresholds are lower than annual year thresholds. They are also based on potential to emit, or PTE, with the exception of lead. And on the right, you can see a table of triennial year thresholds for each pollutant in tons per year. Next. Oh. Now, as I mentioned, the EPA has proposed some rule revisions to the AERR, which, if finalized, would change how, what, and when emissions are reported. They proposed these revisions in July of this year, and the proposed revisions would have new deadlines for criteria air pollutants reporting. The proposed revised rules also would require facilities to submit hazardous air pollutants for the first time. Currently, those are not required by Georgia, but this would have it change if these rules are passed. The revisions also change reporting thresholds. Specifically, they get rid of the triennial year reporting. So that means every year would have the same thresholds. There are new data collection requirements proposed that cover small generating units, mobile sources, and portable sources. Confidential business information is also handled differently in the proposal, as emissions data will no longer be entitled to confidential treatment. Also, the rule proposes for facilities to submit certain source tests using electronic reporting. Again, these rules are not finalized and are subject to change. States and stakeholders have made comments to EPA regarding them, and currently EPA is yet to respond. So we'll keep a lookout for that, and we'll update everyone when new information is made available. With that, I'll be handing it over to Emily for the CAERS training portion of this training.
All right, thank you, Ruben. Doing next slide. Okay, so CAERS is an application provided by EPA's Central Data Exchange that allows facilities to report emissions from Georgia to NEI. Georgia EPD is responsible for the QA of any emissions data before it is sent to EPA. HAPS data submitted to CAERS is available in the TRI once a facility has certified their report. EPD does not need to approve the report before that data is available in the TRI, since the TRI data is certified separately through TRI ME Web. Next slide. So there are two roles for facilities reporting in CAERS. Preparers are able to create initial reports and enter data. There can be more than one preparer per facility, but they cannot certify the report. A certifier can do everything a preparer is able to do in CAERS, but is also responsible for certifying the report. There can only be one certifier per facility. Preparer and certifier accounts in CAERS may be used for multiple facilities, so a user does not need to create multiple accounts to report from multiple facilities. Next slide. So now I'll be going over HAPS guidance for this year. So since EPA released the proposed new AERR rule that Ruben talked about earlier, we've been working to modify our plans for a Georgia HAPS inventory until HAPS reporting is planned to be mandatory in 2026. We encourage facilities to voluntarily report HAPS to CAERS. So for the 2023 emissions inventory year, a pilot program will focus on the experiences and timelines of submitting HAPS in CAERS. Like I said before, any HAPS submitted in CAERS will also be available in TRI ME Web. Next slide. So if your facility chooses to voluntarily submit HAPS, the process to entering them in CAERS is the same as CAPS. One important note is that HAPS should be included in their corresponding criteria air pollutant. For example, any HAPS that are also VOC should be included in the VOC total. This is not going to be double counting. HAPS and CAPS are kept separately in terms of data modeling. HAP reports should match what's reported to TRI, regardless of whether you use CAERS to submit data to TRI ME Web. Slide. Now I'll walk you through the process of the 2023 Georgia Point Source Emissions Inventory. This process has three main parts. First, reporters will need to update facility and contact information. Secondly, they will determine whether the Title V facility qualifies to opt in or opt out. And finally, they will submit their emissions inventory or their opt-out determination. The first step is to go into GECO and update your facility information. The link to GECO is at the top of this slide. You'll have to register for an account if you've never accessed GECO before, and returning users with emissions inventory access will have the facility's name listed and the emissions inventory box checked on the right. You will click on the facility name to access the EI form. For new users, you will need to request access to your facility before using the hyperlink. And that can be done using the button at the bottom. So this is the screen where reporters request access to their facility. Make sure to check the emissions inventory box and review the admin users listed. If the admin users are unavailable for whatever reason, or you need our assistance regarding access, please check the highlighted box indicating that you will need assistance. If admin users are available, an email will be sent to them. GECO will show a preview of that email. Next slide. When you click on the facility name on the GECO homepage, you will arrive at the facility's homepage. The user access tab allows facility admins to manage user access, and the communications preference tab can be changed here, but there's also a link in the emissions inventory form. This is also where you can access the emissions inventory link to get access to the 2023 application. Next slide. The GECO form is formatted to be more streamlined this year. So the first step, once you're in the emissions inventory application, is to review the facility information. If any of the facility information is incorrect, please let us know by emailing the emissions inventory email. And please note that NICS codes here must match what is listed in CAERS. Slide. Next, you'll want to update your contact information, which includes your main EI contact and the CAERS users roles. So the link at the top indicates to update the main emissions inventory contact first. Next slide. So if you click that link, it will open the communication preferences in another tab. You will select the emissions inventory link on the left-hand side to access input fields. Once you save the contact information, you can close this screen and go back to the emissions inventory form. Next slide. To update CAERS users, you may need to add or modify users. The contact information is important to fill out first in GECO because that's how we compare access for CAERS. So if it doesn't match what is entered into CAERS, it could lead to delays in gaining access to CAERS. So some things to remember is that you can change your users at any point throughout the year, and the same person can be preparer and certifier. Selecting both streamlines providing the information. And also if a user is both a serves both the preparer and certifier role for a facility, they only need to use their certifier account for that facility in CAERS. Next slide. Okay, this year emails will be sent to facilities that will indicate whether a facility qualifies to opt in or we expect them to need to report. So if we expect that a facility will opt out, we will indicate the potential to emits that were submitted to Georgia. If the facility agrees with these numbers, they can use a PDF of that email as confirmation. If the facility disagrees with any of those numbers, they can submit a revised opt-out form, which can be downloaded on this screen. This screen also provides instructions to new CDX or CAERS users, and you can use this link to get access to Open CDX, which will give you access to CAERS. This year, CAERS is launching for the 2023 emissions inventory on February 5th, and we'll send out a reminder email ahead of that. Next slide. So this is our opt-out form for the 2023 year. It's in the same format as last year, but you'll note that the emissions thresholds are updated for the triennial year. So if your facility has to complete an opt-out form, you will need to fill out all of the correct PTE emissions and select whether the PTE comes from a permit limit or a permit application. The column to the right of PTE will indicate what justification you'll need. And then facility response is for entering either that permit limit, permit condition that has a permit limit, or the permit application number. If your facility emitted lead, you'll also need to include basic calculation information because lead is actual emissions and not potential emissions. Next slide. When you begin to report in CAERS, you'll see the opt-in questions before CAERS generates your report. So the first question is whether your facility was operating in the 2023 emissions inventory year. If your facility was not operating, then you'll be able to opt out without any additional information needed. And note, facilities that have never operated, including those under construction, do not need to submit anything to the emissions inventory. Next slide. The second question is about thresholds. So if your facility is below all of these thresholds, then CAERS will generate a blank emissions inventory report. You'll then attach either a PDF of your opt-out email or a copy of your opt-out form, depending on whether the email had all of the correct PTE, or if you emitted, if your facility emits lead, you'll need to submit an opt-out form regardless. Next slide. So this is an example of the opt-out screen in CAERS. Notice it's just a blank version of the emissions inventory report where you'll be able to attach any documentation and then certify that report. Next slide. And then if your facility is operating, so it's operating and above all of the thresholds, then CAERS will generate an emissions inventory report based on the previous year that you reported, so that you can begin reporting those updated emissions. Right. Next slide. And now I'll pass it off to Maria to talk about our internal QA checks.
Thanks, Emily. CAERS conducts automatic QA checks that the user can address when completing the emission inventory, but we also conduct our own QA checks that have not yet been implemented into CAERS or are Georgia specific. And so here are a list of items that we check. For opt-out facilities, the EI team will check what the facility has provided against our records to make sure both facility and EPD are on the same page. As mentioned earlier, we will have identified beforehand who should be opting out or reporting. We'll make sure temporarily or permanently shut down facilities are opting out for the correct year. New for this year, we'll check lead actual emissions for facilities who have lead listed in their permit. Additionally, for facilities who have become a synthetic miner at some point in 2022 and may have received an email from us, we will be changing the status in CAERS, so you will not need to do anything. Emissions data. So for emissions data, we have three main checks. We will check all emissions for correctness and reproducibility. There's an emphasis on PM 2.5 emissions due to recent exceedances in certain parts of the state. For operating processes that have 0 tons per year, we will check for an explanation on why the process is not shut down. We will also look for reasons for significant facility-wide emission changes. An increase or a decrease of greater than 20% will trigger further investigation, and perhaps that's 10%. For control devices, we'll be checking what facilities list against the previous CAERS entry and applicable permit. For the quality check report, we check to see if any warnings are listed in your report. And if there are any, we'll confirm to see if they were addressed or not. Finally, we will be checking all co-located facilities to ensure that they are reporting based on collective PTE totals. This affects facilities the most when the PTEs added up for both facilities exceed thresholds. This results in requiring both facilities to report. So the next series of slides will provide guidance on how to provide a successful submittal. To begin, when a reporter opens a facility report for the new EI year, they will get a report creation log as identified by the image in the left-hand corner. And when you view the log, it will show you insight on two types of changes that could have occurred. The first type of change occurs when there is a new EPA emission inventory data field update, like an updated emission factor unit of measure correction in the reference. The second type of change is a CAERS data field override, which may happen when uploading the bulk upload template into CAERS. For example, the hours per operating period doesn't make sense with the other temporal data fields that the user provided. Next slide. So when entering new emission units from within the user interface, it's recommended to use emission unit and control device nomenclature that matches what is in the permit. However, if they currently do not match, don't modify the IDs that are already entered in CAERS. To help EPD reviewers, you can provide the matching unit ID in a description field. For new emission units, or even just making edits to your report, it is helpful to know the general order of emission data entry. This slide and the next two slides kind of reinforce this importance. So it is generally emission unit first, followed by process entry, then you'll add the pollutants, release point, control device, and path. Then you'll go back into the process level and connect the release point to the control device and control path via the release point apportionment feature. Next slide. This slide provides a detailed flow of how you can enter emission units and all its associated components. It also cross-references where you can find more information in the latest CAERS user guide. Next slide. And this slide goes into detail should you get a controls error or warning. First, you'll access the process through the emissions inventory menu on the left-hand side of the page. The process level page will open, then you'll find the release points associated section, which is on the right side of the page, and select the edit button, which is a box with a pencil on it. Then you'll add the control path in the release point apportionment menu. And you'll click save, and it'll all be connected. Next slide. So to identify different processes of each emission unit, source classification codes are used. There can only be one SEC for each process unless a different unit of measure needs to be used. And in that case, you'll use the alternative throughput feature. Multiple processes of the same unit using the same SEC will result in a warning in CAERS. In this example, the dryer used the same SEC for both combustion and the dryer process. Instead, the user needs to use an in-process field for a flash dryer. To access the full SEC list, you can use the user interface of the website listed at the bottom of the page, or you can download all the SECs into an CSV file. Next slide. This slide elaborates on the operating hours issue that I alluded to earlier. If using the bulk upload template, the average days per week, hours per day, and weeks per reporting period must equal hours per reporting period. Otherwise, the reporting system will change the hours entered in the template to the product of the 3 operating values. Note that the average days per week and average hours per day can be a decimal with up to 3 decimal places. Average weeks per reporting period and hours per reporting period can only be integers. In the user interface, the hours per reporting period will be rounded to an integer, and it's automatically calculated in CAERS in any sense. In the next 2 slides, I will review what documentation will be needed for source testing and material balance emission calculation methods. These 2 types of calculation methods, we do receive a wide range of supporting documentation to none at all. So we're going to clarify on what is needed. So for source testing, there are 2 options. For the emission factors, there's one without controls and the other that includes the control efficiency and the emission factor. So please provide the test date of the source test, the emission factor ratio, if that applies, and where you got that ratio, and if applicable, provide any control information. Note, there is a character maximum, so there is another comment box below for any additional information. For material balance, we are looking for more documentation with the emissions reported. For PM emissions, we will want density or specific gravity, solids content, and amount of material used. For VOC emissions, the data requirements are similar. Please provide this information in the description of calculation field, or if it's more extensive, attach the documents in the report summary attachment section. And we are accepting PDFs now. So this slide applies to facilities who have previously set up their emissions inventory and don't have any new emission units, process, or control devices to add. It's a great tool to use to update throughputs from within the user interface. And note that this year, throughput and fuel material visible in the data bulk entry feature. If entering a fuel material, then both values must be entered and must be the same. And finally, the last 2 slides that are being presented here, I won't go into detail, but you can use as a reference. There are a handful of common errors and warnings when the annual report quality review is run. This first slide features errors that are required to be corrected in order to submit the emission inventory data to EPD. The right-hand column are suggestions on how to address them. And then warnings are QA checks that may or may not have consequence to the report. facilities should be addressing warnings either by updating the issue so that the warning goes away, or by leaving a comment where appropriate in the report on why the information that you entered is fine. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Jing.
Thanks, Maria. Next, I'm going to talk about resources and what to do next. So in Georgia EPD, we have a point source emissions inventory website. This year we had new updates, and also this training PowerPoint slides will be available. And also we're gonna edit our video recording. We're gonna post it on this website maybe in next few days. As you know, CAERS every year they update their user guide. You can come to EPA CAERS website at this address to download new version of user guide, which is going to be very helpful for your 2023 emissions inventory submission. For EPA CAERS training, they always post it at the EPA CAERS website listed here, and you can review what happened in the past training. For 2023 emissions inventory submission, EPA will have 4 trainings. It will be in January. First training is called Welcome to CAERS. This is a great training for any new users who has not used CAERS before. It's on January 5th. You can register this event at our GECO event website. And also on January 9th, CAERS would have a user interface training. This is going to cover what's the new updates for CAERS. We suggest for all preparers and even certifier to join this training. For control path training will be on January 10th. This is going to be very helpful for the facility who has a control device, don't know how to put a control path correctly. This is a great training to attend. Last training is going to be on January 16th. It's about a bulk uploading template. This is going to be great for any new facilities who has not done CAERS before. They want to try to use a bulk uploading templates, which is very convenient. It's a spreadsheet. You can work on your spreadsheet first with this uploading template and then upload it to the CAERS website. So there might be some new updates. We do suggest if any facility who's interested to use this bulk uploading template function, we suggest you to register this training. So for all EPA training, they will be putting all the video recordings at the website probably in February or later time. EPA does take some time to posting their trainings. For this year, we're gonna start our live help session from February to July. And we try to really encourage facility to start your emissions inventory as early as you can. And we're here to help you. As Ruben mentioned, after July 15th, we'll no longer provide extension or help session. As the facilities submit your data, our EI team will QA your data as soon as we receive your certified information. We will reach out to your facilities if we find out there's any errors or we need some verification about your emissions data. So just be watchful from us. The email, send it from emissions.inventory@dnr.ga.gov. As always, we really appreciate every facility's participation in our emissions inventory. Your help us to obtain and maintain very accurate emissions inventory for state of Georgia, which is really help us to reach our goal of improving Georgia air quality. We thank you for your hard work and cooperation. Next, we're gonna come to the questions session. feel free to type in your question or raise your hands, or feel free to email